about the mezuzah.
Great.
Yeah, the security system. That's how I look at it.
Okay.
Yeah. It was my title, I think, or the security system.
Well, it's by divine providence that you want to talk about that, because I just so happen to have brought some mezuzahs over.
Amazing.
Unreal how that works.
So people have noticed that when they enter into Jewish homes, there's a thing on the door, right? On the outside of the door. And some people, when they pass by a mezuzah, they touch it and kiss it. Others don't, for whatever reason. And they're all over the house. So if you could explain to us, what is it?
So the mezuzah, there's a verse in the Torah that says, in the book of Deuteronomy, that you shall write them on the doorposts of your home and on your gates. That's all it says. So write what, and what does it mean to write them on the doorpost? And so what the oral tradition teaches us is that we're talking about the mezuzah. The word mezuzah actually means doorpost. So, and in fact, the word mezuzah appears for the first, it doesn't appear in the context of the mitzvah that we've come to know as mezuzah. So we'll take a step back. It's almost Passover, so maybe it'd be appropriate to mention that the word mezuzah appears in the Torah. It appears, well, maybe once in the book of Genesis, I believe, but it appears prominently in the book of Exodus at the time of the Exodus. So God instructs the people to take a lamb tied to the bedpost, right, to bring an offering on the night before they were to leave, the day before they were to leave Egypt, and then to paint the blood of the offering on their doorposts. And then God says, you'll paint it on the doorposts, and I will pass over your homes. That's where the name Passover comes from. Right. God says that I will pass over, Pesach, to pass over the homes that have the blood on the doorposts. So we see immediately that there's this connection between marking a Jewish home on the outside, on the doorpost, and God's protection. You mentioned about being the security system. So that's the first place we read about the mezuzah, which is the doorpost. Later on in the book of Deuteronomy, we're instructed to write upon our doorposts. What do we write? So what the mezuzah has the first two chapters that we say during the daily Shema. I think we may have talked about the Shema in the past, I'm not sure. But basically, it's two chapters from the book of, two portions, selections from the book of Deuteronomy. One that declares God's absolute oneness, right? The seminal prayer in Judaism, the Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And then another chapter that talks about keeping the commandments and what would happen if we don't observe the commandments. And in both of them, we have this, the writing of the mezuzah, or the mention of the mezuzah. So in both of these paragraphs, you have it. Now, how are they written on the doorpost? The way they're written on the doorpost is on a piece of parchment.
So let's
we'll hold it in a second. Well, let me see. I've got some mezuzah cases. You might
teaser.
Well, let's see. So people think that the mezuzah is a case, right? It's all about the case. But the case is really just the outer protection of for the mezuzah. Ironically, the mezuzah protects the home, but you have the case that protects the mezuzah.
Is that waterproof? Are they waterproof?
Well, here in Florida, especially where we have some intense weather, it's important to have a weatherproof case if you're hanging one outside your home, especially if there's direct sunlight or moisture. You want to have a weatherproof case, not just any old case, because it will damage the mezuzah inside. So here you have a lucite clear case. This is a weatherized metal case,
right?
And then here's a fancy decorative case. This is silver mezuzah cover, and it's open on the bottom. You'll see what comes out. The main thing of the mezuzah is what's inside, which is the scroll. Okay, so
and they even come larger.
Yeah, they come in all sizes, right?
But the scroll is the same size.
The scroll is not the same size. Well, the cases come in different sizes. Depends on the scroll. You have scrolls that are small, such as this scroll is a small scroll. You have big mezuzahs. I know when you go to Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, I think they have the largest mezuzah there. So one of the entrance ways, I think it's maybe in the Guinness Book of Records, I'm not sure, a very large mezuzah. Yeah. So the mezuzahs come in all sizes, but it's what the mezuzah is a scroll written on parchment, and in a specific way by a scribe who's a professional writer, and they're all handwritten. So you'll find, you'll go shopping for mezuzah, you might be carried away with you want to hang on to it, or where's the cat? You want to
show it?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You might be looking for a case, a fancy case, and sometimes it'll come with a little insert inside that's usually a piece of paper. The most expensive part of the mezuzah should be the scroll, which is the actual, this is the actual mezuzah, is the handwritten scroll. So to make sure that it's handwritten, make sure that it's on parchment, not printed on paper or even printed on parchment, that it's handwritten, and that, of course, it's kosher, because every meaning that every letter of the mezuzah has to be written just right. If
And they
there's
can't
a letter
touch
missing,
each other.
they can't touch each other. If a letter is missing, if a word is misspelled, if letters are cracked or not legible, then mezuzah would not be kosher. So they have to be written by a competent scribe and then checked, reviewed by a competent scribe. This mezuzah, I think, has it's got a little sticker on the back that says that it was checked by a scribe. So that's the inside of the mezuzah. So 2 paragraphs, which are 2 portions from the book of Deuteronomy.
Is that a skin from an animal?
Yes, this is the hide of an animal, of a cow.
Okay, kosher animal.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there's a whole process in how these things are prepared, how they're made, and how they have to be written. But that's just the general idea. So it's hide that is that's prepared properly and then handwritten on the back of the mezuzah, right? So this would be the back. It would be rolled up, right? And then this would be the back. So on the back of the mezuzah, you'll notice you have. I don't know if you can see this. Which camera, Tommy, do we want to look at? Which one do you want? This one here?
Yeah.
Is this a good look? So you've got this 3-letter name of God here, Shaddai, which actually one of God's names, but also is an acronym for the words Shomer Daltot Yisrael. God is the guardian of the doors of Israel, right? So it also alludes to this protective quality of the mezuzah. And then on top, you'll notice also written upside down, very mysterious looking writing. And I don't know if you could, if you'll be able to get this on the camera, but you see where it's written here on the top. The other side, if I were to turn this around, the back side of this writing would be the name of God. God is our God, and then the continuation is one, right? So in the top verse, the Shema, the Hero Israel, so you'd have Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Right, the back side of this are those three words, and it's written upside down. It's written in code because these letters don't spell any words. These are not Hebrew words, but what they are is it's a code for exactly these words. God is our God. God is one, and what essentially the writing is you take each letter. We may have also touched on this in the past. Each letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value as well, right? So the letter Aleph is the first letter, that's 1, right? Beis, which would be Bet, the second letter of the alphabet is 2, and so on and so forth. So each letter has a numerical value. The numerical values, I'm sorry, that was just to confuse you. Not besides for the numerical value, the letters follow a certain sequence. That's what I meant to say. The letters follow a sequence. So you have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, right? They all go one after the other. The numerical value tells you that they go in order as well, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're all numbered. If you were to write out God's name, right, which is Yud, the letter Yud, which is the 10th letter of the alphabet, right? And so on and so forth. So if you were to write the following letter instead, you'd get this word. So in other words, this is God's name, just one letter beyond each one of the letters of the alphabet. Does that make sense?
No.
So, okay. So let's say you were going to write the word dad.
Okay.
Yeah. Dad. So dad would be D-A-D, right? What's the letter after D in the alphabet? E. Right? What's the letter after A? B. So if you were to write EBE, that would be code for DAD. Now, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's how that works. And it's written on the back of the 3 letters, the 3 names of God that it represents.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So
how many names does God have?
God has many, many names.
Depending upon what you want to pray for?
Well, God is referred to, there are 7 ineffable names of God, or names that have a certain level of sanctity that we won't even pronounce. But then God's known by many names, even those that are not sort of sacred You'd consider them sacred names, but still have a certain amount of sanctity because God is known by those names as well. But then when you get into the mystical tradition, you get into Kabbalah, you'll find different formulations of the names of God, so that they would spell different things and have different numerical values depending on how you spell the name. And so it gets...
I gotta tell you,
okay.
the more I'm learning about this whole thing and the Torah and everything, the more I'm realizing there's no way that man could have possibly written the Torah. You know, they say that Moses wrote it when he went up, and there's no way, because there's so many codes in the Torah. How could Moses have possibly done all of that? You know what I'm saying? It's crazy the more I'm learning. So anyhow, back to what you were saying. That's a very different
topic.
Discussion. So back to the mezuzah.
So back to the mezuzah. So the mezuzah represents God's protection of the Jewish people. We put it on our doorpost. What's interesting is that I've just spent some time talking about these letters, the 3 words in the back, these mysterious words. Those, your mezuzah could be kosher without those words in the back. That's really just a custom that sprang up. I'm not sure what the origins of that custom is. Some speculate that it's because there was a time when Jews weren't allowed to have a mezuzah. You couldn't identify as a Jew. It was dangerous to have a mezuzah on your door. So they would write in code on their doorposts or in a scroll or something. They'd write that, which is sort of the main thrust of what's written in the mezuzah. God is the name of God. And so they would write it in code so people wouldn't understand and wouldn't know. And then once that ban was lifted, that threat was gone, they were able to, again, put mezuzahs up on their door.
So how would you say it's a security system?
So the mezuzah is a security system in the sense that it reminds us of God's protection, God's constant protection. In fact, what's unique about a mezuzah is that the mezuzah itself offers protection to us, whether even when you're not engaged in doing anything particularly spiritual or holy, right? The mere fact that we have a mezuzah on our door, that marks us, as I mentioned, going back to the Exodus of Egypt, where we mark our territory, mark our property, mark our domain with a recognition that it's all God's. You know, you put a mezuzah on the door, the first thing that comes to mind should be that this is God's home. Right, God who provides this for me. So it establishes that God owns that the entire world is God's.
It's a reminder.
It's a reminder, absolutely, and it's a reminder that God is always watching. Since it's God's world and everything belongs to God, everything that happens in the world happens the way God wants it to happen, and so it's an added reminder that everything happens because that's how God wants it to be. And when we I'm sorry to cut you off, but go ahead. Just finish that point. When we are mindful of that, when we can live with that awareness, then that itself facilitates that protection. So the mere fact that we recognize that God runs, it's just like any kind of positive intent that you would have that can bring about a positive result. So the same is true when we recognize that it's God's world and that he runs the world. The more of a reminder we can have, the more we can sort of internalize that, then of course, the more we are open to that protection as well.
So how many mezuzahs, like you said on the front door, but there's also mezuzahs on the inside of the house.
Right.
And is it on every single door?
Yeah. So many people have the very good custom of putting the mezuzah up on all the doorways in their home or in their home, your office. So any living space would get a mezuzah on the doorpost.
Except the bathroom. Except
for the bathroom. Yeah. And any other room, it would be like the bathroom that's not designated, that somebody wouldn't normally. Well, even the laundry room could have it if it's a room that's not that wouldn't be inappropriate to sleep in, for instance. Okay. So you would put it on those doors. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I heard that every so often you need to check them to make sure they're still kosher.
So the truth is that if you have a kosher mezuzah, you buy. It's very important to know that when you're buying a mezuzah, to make sure to buy it initially, to make sure that it's a kosher mezuzah. But once you have a kosher mezuzah, you can put it on your door and you can, well, not forget about it. It's a daily reminder. Every time you walk through the door, it reminds you should be aware of it. But the point is that if it's a kosher mezuzah hung on your door, you can rely on its status as a kosher mezuzah. You never really have to check it. But because there's certainly the outer doors where there's sunlight, the direct heat and moisture, and even inside, sometimes the mezuzah will fade. The letters might fade. There might be some cracking. There might be some just damage to the mezuzah just because of the environment that it's in. And so it's a good thing to check it from time to time.
So I heard that if you have bad luck in your home, for whatever, if something happens, the first thing the rabbi says is check your mezuzahs. Is that correct? And is it that important?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's not uncommon today. If somebody, so for example, if somebody is, God forbid, robbed, so their home is burglarized. So anybody who takes the mezuzah seriously, first thing they're going to do is check their mezuzah before they check their security system, the alarm system. They're going to check the mezuzah to make sure that it's okay. Yeah, the mezuzah brings blessing and protection to all aspects of our lives. So it's a good thing if somebody's experiencing some kind of hardship or going through a turbulent time to have their mezuzahs checked. And the reason for this is mainly it brings everything back into a realignment, right? So we see that there's a connection between what happens in the material world and the physical plane, the aspect of life that we can see and feel and touch, and the spiritual plane that is a little bit beyond our perspective and perception, and to bring them all into alignment, to recognize that God runs the world. So when we can have that alignment, that itself already brings cure and brings blessing into our lives. So if there's something wrong spiritually, that might also take on some kind of physical manifestation and expression. And so checking the mezuzah allows us to sort of bring those back into alignment.
So how do you put a mezuzah up?
How do you put a mezuzah up? So,
and do you need a rabbi to put them up? Or
well, I don't want to be out of a job, so of course the answer is yes. No, you don't need a rabbi to put up a mezuzah. The way when you put up a mezuzah, so obviously you're going to want to put it in a case, and you're going to have it wrapped and packed properly. You want to make sure that it's right side up, not upside down, right? So you have a scroll, handwritten. This is the right side up. This is upside down. You want to make sure that when you hang it right side up. So you need to know which side is up and which side is down, and then you have to know where to put it. So we put it on the doorpost on the right-hand side. So when you're entering to the home, as you face your home, as if you're about to enter, it would go on the right-hand side on the doorpost, about shoulder height.
Why is that on the right and not the left?
So the reason it goes on the right and not on the left is because the right side represents kindness. And the right side is the primary side, the dominant side. So therefore, we put every mitzvah that we do, unless expressly indicated otherwise, would be on the right side.
Oh, that's interesting.
Interesting that when we light the Hanukkah menorah on Hanukkah, so also the appropriate place to put it, people are familiar with putting it in the window, but the appropriate place to put it would be in the doorway as well, and that we put on the left side. And like that, you're surrounded by mitzvahs. You have the mezuzah on the right, you've got the menorah on the left, you've got really just a wonderful ambiance that you can create. Yeah. But generally, everything would be on the right side. So it's on the right side going in. Inside the home, what's the right side? Facing which way? What's the right side? What's the left side? So for that, you'd have to consult a rabbi often to help you navigate which side to put it on. But the general rule is that it goes on the right side. And then, very interesting, when it comes to the mezuzah, so we have a scroll, right? We'll hold the scroll, right? So here's right side up. The name of God that's on the back should be up on top. Interesting that the name of God, this 3-letter name of God, starts with the letter Shin, right? Which is why a lot of mezuzah cases, you'll see all 3 that I brought here, they all have the letter Shin as on the top. Sometimes they'll have God's name, sometimes they'll just have the Shin, and that's just sort of homage to what's on the back of the mezuzah, right. That's the first letter of of that specific name. Now, when we hang up the mezuzah, what's right side up? So we know what upside down looks like, right? If the writing is upside down. But when I have a scroll, what's right side up? Is laying flat, is this right side up to lay it flat? Or is this right side up? Now I'm hanging it on a vertical space, right? So what would be the right way to put it? Would the right way to put it be down, laying? I have my scroll, lay the scroll down on my doorpost, or have it standing vertically? So of course, this is a debate among the sages. And what's very interesting specifically when it comes to the mezuzah is that a lot of the laws are debated, right? We extrapolate, we learn them, we derive them from the Torah, and then the oral tradition tells us what it tells us in terms of the parameters and the way to practice.
And the rabbis to figure all this out.
But the rabbis figure it all out. But then there are certain things that are left to interpretation. And so you interpret the verses, you interpret the text, and then you come to a determination based on analysis and based on comparative analysis and so on and so forth. It's a very obviously involved process that you can find in the Talmud. But generally, the rule is when there's a dispute, you follow the majority. Right, majority wins. So we always follow the majority. That's the way we resolve these disputes as to what the right way to do something is. And so it would seem that if you have a dispute, there's not would seem, the way it is, whenever there's a dispute, you follow one opinion. The majority opinion would be the opinion you'd follow. And yet with the mezuzah, we compromise. With the mezuzah, we don't follow one opinion. We don't just say the majority is either standing up or laying down. We say compromise. And so when we hang the mezuzah, we actually lean it on the side, which is a compromise between straight up
is that
and laying
why?
down. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was to face Jerusalem or something like that. Or
no, the mezuzah
way-
generally, when you lean it, you'll lean it pointing into the room. So whenever it's on the right hand side, the top, right, so the top part would be leaning in towards the room on the right side. But why is it that we compromise when it comes to mezuzah, unlike any other area in Jewish tradition where we follow one opinion? Well, of course, the mezuzah goes on the front door of the home.
Mm-hmm.
And a very important lesson before we walk into our home, obviously, is that it's God's home, and that God has a place in our home. He's at home in our homes because it's his home, and we want to make him comfortable in our home. But also, if you want to bring God into your home, you want to bring peace into your home, you have to compromise. You don't always see things the same way, and you could follow all kinds of rules about how we're going to resolve disputes. But a key value in Judaism is peace. And one of the keys to peace is compromise, to be able to compromise. So as we enter into our home, when we see the mezuzah leaning in, we recognize that we have to always be willing to compromise.
So there's a blessing that you say as you're putting it up.
Yes.
And the blessing is?
So whenever we do a mitzvah, whenever we fulfill one of the divine commandments, there's a blessing that we recite beforehand. The majority of the text is the same, where we blessing God, King of the universe, who commanded us, sanctified us with his commandments, and commanded us to do X, right? Whatever it is that we're going to do. When we hang the mezuzah, so we bless God, who's sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to affix a mezuzah. Ligbo'a mezuzah. Ligbo'a mezuzah means to affix the mezuzah to our doorposts. So we hang it up, you get it ready, put it in its place, you recite the blessing, and then you press it onto the.
Now, so you say press it. You could have double.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's very.
You could have a hammer and a nail.
Sure. You
It
can
doesn't
screw it on. You can press it on. Yeah. Absolutely.
So you talk about gates. I have outside gates.
Right. So the rule for a mezuzah is that it has to have doorposts and a lintel. So if there's no lintel, that's the post up top.
Oh.
I think that's what it's called, right? That's the lintel, is the post that goes on top. So it's not just about having two side posts, but it also has to be a post above. There has to be a doorway, a door frame.
Okay.
And if you have that frame, then it requires mezuzah. So there are some people that have these nice archways or entrances to their homes where that would require a mezuzah. But for most people, it's just a gate that doesn't have anything above, anything on top. So that those entryways don't require mezuzahs.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Okay, very good.
Yeah. So there's an interesting story in the recorded in the Talmud about most scholars believe that it was with the nephew of Titus, right, the Roman emperor, and he had converted to Judaism, and he'd moved off to Jerusalem. And Titus was very embarrassed. He was the one who destroyed the temple, and here he was. His nephew goes and converts to Judaism. They were oppressing the Jewish people at the time, and so he dispatched soldiers to go bring his nephew back to him. And the soldiers came and they sat with him, and they couldn't convince him to go. He was very happy with his newfound faith, and they couldn't convince him to go. Anyway, this went on. He kept sending others. Finally, he tells them, "Listen, don't talk to him. He's clearly a smooth talker and he's very persuasive. Just don't talk to him. Just go and collect him." So the soldiers go and they come to the house. They say, "We're here to basically just take you into custody and take you back to your uncle. They were not going to engage in conversation." And so they take him. He agrees to go. And as he's walking out of the door, he touches the mezuzah on his way out.
Oh, okay.
Well, the soldiers that was a very peculiar act. Why is he touching this scroll on his doorpost? So they asked him, what was it? They couldn't resist. And he said that you are soldiers, right? Your job is to guard the king, to protect the king. And what happens if the king's life is under attack? You take the first arrow, right? You take the first hit for the king. In Judaism, God, the King of Kings, says, "I will take the first hit for you." It's the king that protects his people, not the other way around. And that really resonated with soldiers who literally put their lives on the line to protect their leader. The idea that the king protects them and not the other way around. And that was the end of that. He never ended up going to his uncle, and he eventually just dropped it. They couldn't convince him. They couldn't take him. So, but that's a very profound and powerful message.
Is that why we touch it?
So the reason we touch is to show respect. We want to be mindful of it, and it's a holy object, right? It contains sacred writing and is a sanctified object, and so to show respect and honor, so we would touch it. People would kiss, put their hand to the lips, but even just touching it is already enough. It shows sort of an awareness and a sensitivity to, and respect,
acknowledgement,
and an acknowledgement. Correct.
Yeah, very good. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was fast. The fastest we've ever had.
Great.
Good. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Ask the Rabbi. I believe next week.
Every time you tease the following week, we end up talking about something else. So,
well, no, I wasn't even going to tease about it. Should I announce?
No. It's a surprise. Just keep
a surprise? Yeah. But I want them.
No. You want them to mark their calendars? No.
There's going to be a surprise next week, and you'll have to tune in to find out what it is.
Much better. Okay.
You like that? Okay. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.